Hey, good morning. I haven't done a recording in a while. Um this one I really have been wanting to do. Um I was in close contact, excuse me, with someone who is in the hospital now with COVID. So, um we're around day 4 of my quarantine, day 5 or 6 of when I was um exposed. I have had my 2 shots and a booster. I've had 2 Pfizers and a Moderna, I think. So, and the booster was 3 or 4 weeks ago. So, as far as it goes, about as safe as you can be. I have a sore throat today, and I started feeling woozy this evening. But that could be the change of weather. It's gotten cold, and it just could be my mind playing tricks on me. But I wanted to record this in case it gets worse, and I wouldn't be able to talk for an hour. Now, this is probably not going to help at all. But the Navy is a big part of my life, was. The first time I was truly away, even though I considered myself mostly an independent child. Um, my parents were there for necessity, not because I had any interest in being around them. My mom, um, less so than my dad, of course, but um, she gets her turn for worst parent award. Don't worry. Um, I mentioned it briefly at the end of high school, this sort of forced choice that I thought, where my dad could pay for my college, but he refused. My mom wanted to pay, but she didn't have the money, in part because of that they were shitty parents and they couldn't get along. Um, and so all they did was tear each other down to the point where they couldn't even care for their children. Um, Now, nothing's fixed on my end. I just got an email from Brandy, or just answered one, where I brought up a list of problems, and she wrote back how everything is my fault, didn't want to fix any of the problems, didn't offer any solutions, and somehow she thinks this is okay. No, that makes us both shitty parents. Um, so that's upsetting. The other big thing to talk about is at this time, I had my first serious adult relationship. And this mixes in a lot with what happens in the Navy. First, because as you recall, love is incredibly difficult for me. It's kind of foreign. My dad would hit me and then tell me he loved me. Um, and so it's a difficult emotion for me to process. I'm not comfortable with it. Um, and then, of course, there's long distance, there's separation. Um, So all these things play into what eventually happens. But the Navy is a great story. Um, there are some um, trigger warnings. Um, we'll be talking about suicide, heartbreak, severe depression, even to the point of manifesting um, physical problems from emotional problems. So, uh, well, those will come near the end, though. We'll talk about those. But we'll build up first. I traveled, so it's very exciting. I'm going to tell some stories. Um, so it's not all doom and gloom. It's easy when you're younger to think, oh, this terrible thing happened. But as long as you learn from something, it can still have positive impact on you later. Yeah, it was probably a terrible thing, but um, as long as you're not repeating that mistake and you can pass on to those who come after you, there's a lot of valuable lessons. And often when I look back and you do the time machine thing, what would you go back? What would you change? It's hard to say. Um, a lot of these problems, of course, come from childhood. A lot of them I created. And then there's systematic problems in the Navy. The Navy wasn't perfect. It was a shit organization. They didn't care about mental health. Their command structure, officers and enlisted, comes from ancient times, completely out of date. Um, and the ship I was on, commissioned after World War II. It was the first, I'm jumping ahead, but I was on the first nuclear powered aircraft carrier, the USS Enterprise. So it has all these prototype nuclear reactors on it, a very old ship. And I was in there around the year 2000-ish. So we'll talk about the problems that came with that. Um, what I have pictured here, if you Google nuclear reactor panel, these are the pictures that come up. Um, so we won't go into all that. We'll talk a little bit about nuclear power because it's an interesting subject for me. But this gives you an idea of what someone might be looking at who has a job. And I think most of these are civilian. Um, it is ironic in a lot of ways. I talked briefly about living in my father's shadow in a way. We had the same birthday, um, which tainted it for me. The other similarities are he worked at a civilian nuclear power plant. There are only two in Texas. There's one up near Dallas, and then there's the one he worked at. Um, and so he was an electrician there. Um, so that's interesting. I'm jumping a little bit ahead though. So this will probably be a long one. Um, but there's two parts we have to back up first. First, we need to talk about my girlfriend at the time, how that happened, and how that influenced things. And then we'll move on to the Navy story. So our setting is um, we have graduated high school. Um, we are planning on going in the Navy. And at the time, my best friend, his sister, a couple years younger, um, had had a crush on me for a long time, a secret crush. I did not know about this. Um, and it was only when I had said, I'm going in the Navy, I'm leaving in a couple weeks, and I mean a couple weeks, that she told this to me when she broke down and um, was crying and emotional about it. And we fell quickly in love. And that presents a lot of problems. This was just out of the blue for me. Now, for some context, I had been actively working to control my anger, to prepare myself, to start going into this training. Um, I was doing, now I hate exercise. I despise it. It is a torture. But I knew I was going into boot camp. I knew what I'd have to do. And so I was practicing push-ups, sit-ups, running. Oh, I hate running. Um, so this was a complete shift for me. This idea that someone loved me, that someone could care about me. Um, and I became attached very quickly. And um, I would end up paying for that later. But I'm not ashamed to say that I loved someone or that I loved them deeply or quickly. Um, People look down on this, but they shouldn't. You only live once, um, as far as we know. So enjoying parts of it. Um, especially with someone else, is a beautiful thing. And I wouldn't disparage anybody from that. Um, so uh, to go from that to having to leave, um, there are some funny things that happened on the final ride. So I left out of Houston, and my girlfriend lived in Austin, and we were making the final drive down to Houston. I was driving, she was riding with me. It was in an old car. It's an 81 blue Chevy car. And there was something, some hole in a hose or something, I don't know. Basically, the underside of the hood caught on fire while we were driving, and um, ended up having to drive like half the way under like 20 miles an hour or something. I can't remember. Um, I remember not being really scared of going. I remember not wanting to leave or be separated from her. And I felt like it was a cruel bit of life um, to put her in my life when I was already committed to leaving. Um, I like to say that I'm not superstitious. I'll tell you this, and then at the same time, I'll tell you, but the truth is, I am superstitious about this now. Anytime I am happy in life, I become terrified because very soon after, the most horrible things in life will then happen to me. The balance side of people will come out. Oh, all things in balance, as it should be. Maybe, maybe. But for some time in my darker years, um, I remember trying to avoid being happy, specifically to try to cheat fate and what I knew would come afterwards. So I am superstitious, but I'm not, but I am. Um, I remember being in the hotel, leaving, flying on the plane. We need to talk about a little something beforehand, though. So, when you talk about the military, they have you take a test, an ASVAB test. How you score on that determines which jobs or rates, as they're called, I'm pretty sure, you're qualified for. So I scored near perfect on the test. It was a 99 out of 100 or something like that. So I was offered anything, and they wanted me to be a nuke. Um, this was in 1999, I think, and um, you have three. I'll call them jobs, but I believe they were called rates. Um, so they have three nuclear power jobs. You have a machinist mate, which is a more hands-on, getting dirty type of job. The pipes, the valves. Um, you have um, an EM, electrician's mate, I think. Um, they are the more wire side of things. Um, and The what mine was the electronics technician, the ET. Um, this is eventually becomes the reactor operator. You have some other side jobs. And the non-nuclear side, they deal with radar, I believe. We did have to do some learning in school. We'll talk about that when we get to it. Um, but suffice to say, this is the most technical um, job the Navy offers you. You have to do a lot of training, a lot of school. They don't offer it to everyone. It is very difficult. They have a high failure rate. Um, and we'll talk about it when we go there. But they also have a signing bonus. Um, Obviously, this is, when they need people. This is pre 9/11, 1999. Um, I'm going to not sugarcoat this. They cheated me. Um, I found out once I got to boot camp and I could talk to other people. There was no one, I was offered some pathetic amount um, as a signing bonus. When I got to boot camp, my jaw dropped at the amounts some of these people with the same job as me were offered. Lower test scores didn't matter. Um, it was all up to the recruiter. And I was 100% cheated. Um, and they tell you when you get to boot camp, they flat out tell you your recruiters lie to you. Um, I I would say this put the institution, the Navy, um, in an extremely bad light for me. Um, but what I was being offered, the training was valuable to me, the school was valuable, the job was valuable, um, and I wanted to challenge myself on this. I was no longer the big fish, the smart guy in the small school. Um, I wanted to see what I could really do when put up against um, some of the most difficult things out there. So, and there's quite frankly nothing I could do about it. They cheated me. Um, Boot camp is unpleasant. I'm gonna have to say this. There is no way around it. Their goal in boot camp, they have several. One of them, obviously, um, get you into shape. The second one is to get you adjusted to a chain of command and taking orders. And the third, which I think is incredibly controversial, is to literally break who you are, the independent person, eliminate that, and replace it as a drone. They do not appreciate independent thought. You are punished for it. Now, I'm speaking in 1999. If it is reformed, my apologies. Um, and so, all these things I struggle with. Um, I've not had anybody in my life who I respected, so I didn't care who told me what to do. Some teachers had earned my respect, so I take that back. But just because you tell me what to do, I don't give a shit. Um, you need to have my respect. Now, of course, I hold my tongue as much as possible, but sometimes it slips, so I get extra push-ups or whatever. Um, we'll back up a little bit. So when I first got to boot camp, I remember um, boots. Ironically, the biggest problem. You go there, you're in a factory line, you're getting your clothes shoved at you. You pay for all these, by the way. So your first couple of paychecks are nothing because you're paying them all back for the courtesy of wearing their clothes. Another scam. Um, my feet are big and wide, preferably. They did not have steel-toed boots in my size. They said they would order them. This is ridiculous on the surface. How do you not have boots for people that you know who's coming in? You can't measure them ahead of time. Um, this caused me a large amount of pain for several decades. Because they gave me a steel-toed boot that was literally too small, I developed ingrown toenails on my two big toenails. This would not be fixed for about 15 years. And every time it grows in, it would grow an ingrown. And it was incredibly painful for something dumb and stupid. Um, because they give me this, it's a steel-toe boot, it's heavy. You have to run in them, you have to march in them, you have to wear them all the time. Um, and it's unnecessary um, burden. We know boot camp is unpleasant. That's not what I'm talking about. Um, when you employ somebody, uh, should be, especially when you're employing them for life. It's not a day job. They literally own you. They need to be taking care of people. Um, and anytime I brought it up, I was told to shut up. Boot camp's not supposed to be fun. Um, this again did not allow me to develop any respect for the institution. Um, Fortunately, there were some people that were considerate. I forget the people, what we call them, the people who work at boot camp. Keep wanting to say drill sergeants, but that's not it for the Navy. Anyway, there were a couple who made sure that I got the right size. Of course, it took several weeks for whatever reason. I don't know why. Um, but the damage was already done by then. Um, it I was sick. Um, it was summer in the north, because I had planned it out. I was at least smart enough to do that. But still, you change, the area that you live in. There's different allergies. Of course, they're pushing you. Um, I'm just gonna side note for a while. When you first get there, they line you up like cattle. They have people on both sides of you. Um, so a person on the left, a person on your right, they stick you with a needle, a vaccine on the left and right arm. You take a step forward, two people stick you again. You take a step forward, two people stick you again. Um, this vaccine controversy that's coming up is just ridiculous, especially anyone who's ever been in the Navy. I couldn't tell you what they put in me, but I was happy that they did. The one thing they give you a shot in the ass and you can't sit down for 2 or 3 days without pain. They give you a running PT test the next day. That one I'm really on the fence about morally. They do it on purpose, obviously. Um, there's a certain amount of training you need to do, but then I think that one sits on the line between just unnecessary. Um, but I'm also biased because I hate running so much. It's just torture. My secret to running was that when we would practice, when we would run in the morning, whatever, I would run with the girls. They have a slower pace, but it's still fast enough if you keep up to be good enough. So I found running with the girls was much better. Um, there was one incident which I wish I remember more of. It happened in the cafeteria. We were eating. By the way, you learn to eat very fast. Um, one of the, I'm just going to say drill sergeants. It's not a drill sergeant, whatever the Navy equivalent was, the boot camp people in charge. One of the drill sergeants um, started yelling at one of the recruits. It was some girl in a different, um, whatever word, division from me. So I didn't know her, but it wasn't a correctional thing. He, I don't remember what it was. It was one of those weird, like, um, she had spilled her food or something, and she was cleaning it up, and something happened. I don't know, but he was just being an asshole. Um, and I just went over there to help her, and he told me to sit down or something, and I said, once I'm um, done, I'll go sit down. And then I got in trouble for it or whatever. But um, that's the only time uh, that I recall them being unprofessional, besides the times that I mentioned. Um, I don't believe in God complexes. I don't care who you are. Um, there's right and wrong, and I'll stand up for someone if I see them being picked on or mistreated. Um, daily life, you wake up, um, you have some, you have to make your bed perfectly. Uh, T-squares, I don't remember the word. You have to square the corners of your bed off. Your blanket, your sheets, everything has to look perfect. You can't have any mess. You could have inspections. Your clothes have to be ironed and you're wearing the right things. Um, you might have some morning exercise. You might have drills, marching drills. Um, and you hope for a letter, pretty much, is your only outside contact. Sometimes you're afforded some phone calls. Of course, you have to march all the way across wherever the phones are, and hope that nobody spots you doing anything wrong. Good news, I came in as an E3, so I was paid a little bit more. Um, so that's the third rank. Um, it didn't really matter, of course. You're all recruits. Um, there's nothing else that I remember was very memorable. Cleaning showers, disgusting, showering with a bunch of naked men. Um, we did have one funny story. You have to get your head shaved when you first get there. You get your head or hair all buzzed off. Um, we had one guy, I guess someone had played a prank on him and told him that he had to get rid of all the hair on his head. So before he came, he had shaved his eyebrows off. So he didn't have any eyebrows for the first part of boot camp. Um, Overall, it was an awful experience, made very painful by an ingrown toenail and having to march around in that. Um, um, I remember graduation. Um, my dad, my mom, my girlfriend, her parents came up. Um, and that was in Great Lakes, so Chicago. I remember they call it the Windy City, and you have the little Navy hat, the seaman hat thing, little circle on top of your head. And we were walking through Chicago, and the wind was like blowing strong enough where I had to hold my hat. So it really is the Windy City, man. I don't know how it gets so much wind. Um, I think we'll pause here. The end of boot camp is a good pause. Let me go to the bathroom and refill a drink and take some medicine. And we'll do a part two.